Black AF History, the un-whitewashed story of America. Michael Harriot is here. I want to talk about a bunch of other things as well with you because you be knowing. How did you? Where did you go for the research? Right, because this stuff is it readily available? Because I feel like we're in an era where we're like it's a water hose of information, most of it not right, being foisted upon us in record speed through TikTok and social media and news media and every place, just giving us information. Very little is curated. Everything's about the clicks and the algorithms. Where did you sit to find these pieces? And then what was the story that you wanted to tell as you threaded it through?
A historian, Blair Kelly, who has a great book out, Black Folk, the history of the Black working class in America. She and I created what was essentially a syllabus. Like, what if we had a year to teach this course and how would we divide it up? And so we used primary sources, mostly the research of Black historians. And we also was intentional about like not giving my impression of what happened then, but we went back to Black newspapers, diaries, and saw what Black people were thinking about what was going on in that era that we covered. And so we used the Black people and what they saw through their eyes and their perspectives with all primary sources to tell these stories. And one of the things that I am grateful for is we were able to document those in the footnotes and the endnotes so that you can go back and read these things, right? Like when we talk about the rice culture, I spend a lot of time on it, but we also include the things that you can go back and read about that rice culture, about the Geechee Gullah, about the civil rights movement, about the people that you've never heard of.
It's breadcrumbs, but so much more. 1948, James Buck Harriot, with cement blocks and his own two hands, built the homestead that would house every successive generation of his family. For most of his adult life, he worked a quote unquote good job at a local paper factory while running a two-car taxi company on the side. When his family grew to 6 kids, he added a bedroom and turned the cement patio in the rear into a space for which he operated his cab company. Even after he moved his taxi stand to another location a block away, my family would still refer to that part of the house as the back porch. I was honing in on this. I had a Buck myself. My grandfather, whose picture is over my shoulder, we called him Buck. John Buck Henry Sweeper also built his home with his hands in Summerville, South Carolina. I was like, this must have been the way we got down, but we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. Why was it important for you to give your genealogy in this book?
Because I wanted to do two things. One, to show that when we read any history, it's through the eyes of the person who's telling the story. And so some things are unsaid, but they are a default perspective. For instance, when we talk about French colonists and English settlers and pilgrims, that's from a white perspective because the Africans are just enslaved. The natives or the indigenous people are just Indians. They don't have tribes or history or backstories or cultures or religious motivations, but the white people do. And so I wanted to show that, like, I don't want to hide my perspective. I wanted to show that all history is told through the eyes of the observer and through the lived experience. And the other thing is, one of the premises of this book is that if there is such a thing as Black America, its capital is in South Carolina. So my family is deeply involved in the history of South Carolina. Like Edwards versus South Carolina, the Supreme Court ruling that told us that protest is a form of free speech. My aunt and my uncle were the youngest people arrested at 16 years old in that protest. My aunt created the government program that preserves South Carolina's history. My grandparents were catalogers in the Green Book for South Carolina. So telling that history shows like, oh, this ain't my generation. In a sense, I wasn't really even telling my story. I was telling their story, right? Like how I got here and how Black people got here.
That is so powerful. We are looking next year to do a whole genealogy thing through South Carolina's Dr. Cat Adams, and teach people how to extract these stories, because to your point, we are just having other people's history, other people's family stories, from the Astors to the Vanderbilts, put into the annals of history, and it becomes codified as history because we aren't writing it down. We're oral traditionalists. So I think it's important that we write things down, because that's how, unfortunately or fortunately, I love the oral tradition, but we don't believe it unless it's written down. That's why we have a Bible, right? That has stood the test of time, truth, myth, whatever. It's here because Gutenberg decided to print the first book, and it was a Bible. To this day, we value the book even if we don't open it and read it. This was so important for you to do that. I'm grateful for even modeling, even covertly, what that should look like.
So the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says that he's not going to take a salary during the shutdown. Does the president plan to pause his salary also?
Look, I'm glad that the speaker has made that statement. By the way, members of Congress have to get paid constitutionally, so maybe he'll put it in a sock drawer. I don't know, but they have to get paid during a shutdown. That's theater. That is theater. I will tell you, the guy who picks up the trash in my office won't get a paycheck. That's real. And that's what makes me angry.
That was OMB Director Shalonda Young, really angry over the fact that we were here again after we had already gone through this and averted it before, to not be here again. And then here comes Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and them wanting to show Donald Trump and his supporters that they are tough, that they will not back down, and they will make sure that while they get a paycheck, none of these other people will, including the military that they love so much. Michael, Harriot, make some sense of where we are right now politically.
Right. So I'm glad you played that clip because it shows the absurdity. Like, the small percentage of the federal budget that is congressional salaries or presidential salaries or employee salaries, to say I'm going to show fiscal responsibility by donating my salary or giving up my salary is stupid. It's performative. And I'm glad she called it out. Like, I don't know if in the past other OMB budget directors would have called that out. But where we are is that the Republicans only really have one argument, that fiscal responsibility that they never adhere to, by the way. That's fiscal responsibility argument that America is on the decline because of welfare, because of helping poor people. And that's the root of all of this. Like, we won't pay our bills if you keep giving money to help poor people, is the essence of this argument. And it is historically, dangerous, because none of the people who are shutting down the government, none of the families that have power, none of the people who have power, they aren't hurt by shutdowns, right? We're talking about government employees. We're talking about families. The military families won't be hurt, but the people who depend on, for instance, food stamps and what they call welfare, most of which, and this is important to know, still work, right? Like, there's this notion that people are not working so they can get welfare, when most of the people who get welfare are working. Like, apparently they just choose low-paying jobs to still work,
right?
And then have the extra burden of asking the government for help, right? Which makes no sense. But that narrative has weaved itself into the political ideology of the right. Right. And some can't be, we got to be honest, sometimes the left, right? Because you'll hear black men talking about, well, if the government handouts and the welfare system is what makes black women don't think they need a black man, because the welfare system rewards them for not needing a black man. Like, who have you ever heard say that, right? Like, it's an idea that's bereft of evidence and facts and knowledge. But again, that narrative of hardworking, people who get what they have because of merit and education and hard work versus the poor people who apparently deserve to be poor, is a narrative that is weaved itself throughout American history.
Now it's and you couple that with the criminal element. I'm gonna play a Noam Chomsky clip later on, maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday, maybe I'll play it frequently, where he talked about how racist Reagan was and how on purpose, his domestic policy, Nixon before him, targeted Black people. No, not getting anyone an excuse, but if you are targeted willfully to demonize, to then use these narratives to get elected, and then get people real excited about feeling vindicated, because these criminals, and then you show the videos of the smash and grabs, and it's like young Black kids, and see, this is what's tearing down the country, or the hordes of people coming in from all over. See, this is what's tearing down it. I almost feel like the media is working hand in hand. I can't prove it. Oh, there's history. I actually can't prove it.
Yeah. Like, first of all, like, one of the reasons that I start my book off, so if you haven't read it, the book starts off on the day Ronald Reagan was elected, because we have this narrative now, years later, that like Ronald Reagan was this all beloved white man who united the country by talking about this shining city on a hill, when in real time, Black people were terrified of Ronald Reagan, right? Ronald Reagan got a lower percentage of the Black vote than Trump, right? So,
in my
we
house,
were terrified.
You remember when we thought he was the devil, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 666. Do you remember that going around? Did other people feel that way, or was it just in Jersey? I don't know. Was that going around the country?
No. It was a real thing. It was a real thing.
Okay.
He had the mark of the beast. His name had the mark of the beast, is what I heard. But that narrative, like the way that we have whitewashed Ronald Reagan's legacy to make him this uniter and not a divider, is interesting. Is a great example of the whitewashing of American history. And remember, Ronald Reagan created that welfare queen narrative, right? That demonized, social programs because they were, taken from America. And then he didn't balance the budget, right? He spent more than any president before him, right? When he was telling people, like, we got to do this thing and cut off people's welfare because, we got to have a balanced budget. And after him, Clinton balanced the budget, even though they still depended on that welfare. Became a thing that people just accepted without acknowledging the reality of this country. And I think that is important. I'm glad you brought Reagan up, because it is an important thing to know that, like, a lot of the narrative, the anti-Black narratives that are kind of inextricably tied to the Republican Party were started with this beloved white man.
That's Black AF History, the un-whitewashed story of America. Michael Harriot is here. It is it's number 7 currently on the New York Times bestsellers list. That's a big deal debut there, because folk, not quote unquote mainstream, but folk bought books, not 30,000 books given out at conferences purchased by billionaires, but folk, regular folk. Let's go to the folk. 866-801-8255. Peter in Maryland wants to talk to you, Michael. Michael Harriot is here. Hey, Peter.
Well, hello. I'm so glad that you accepted my call. First, I want to say that I love both of you.
Oh.
I don't turn my station. I don't turn my radio from channel 126. And I've been listening for years. Mr. Harriot, I think you're brilliant. I bought the book. Well, the book was sent to me yesterday. I'm on page 244 now. What? So I should probably take that out by the night. Oh, man, it's real stuff. Necessary. I got folks we from South Carolina, too. I'm from Ohio. And we had to get out of there, too. But I still have people in Anderson, South Carolina. And I just appreciate, man, the line that you said, the line that I read, where you were talking about the people getting killed, the floor was slick with blood. You had to read it over again. That's affected me too. We've been in battle since we've been in this country. Miss Karen, I'm waiting for you to start that school.
Oh.
We need to get you talked about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
We need to get that together.
Here's the school. We're in it.
We in the school.
This is, we're reimagining because, Michael knows this. This education system was designed to do two things. First of all, give us just enough education so we wouldn't kill each other, so that we can be civically engaged, and also train us up in how to work for the 1%. We're not doing that. I want everyone to be free and know and learn the way we should learn and know. And so, school is every day. School is every day, and we're in school. How do we break the structures that are indelibly etched, it seems, in the way in which we engage in all of these systems that were designed literally to keep us in bondage? Michael, Harriot.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to do is realize that, well, first of all, learn history and realize, and one of the things, I hear people talking about, like, we got to educate our children, in our homes because these schools won't teach them enough. But I think one of the reasons I disagree with that with the totality of that narrative is that those are our schools. Black people pay disproportionately higher amounts of property taxes than any other group in America, right? Those schools belong to us. Those aren't white people's schools that we're sending our children to. Those are our schools. We paid for them. They're in our communities. They belong to us. And what our charge should be is, like, we shouldn't stop educating our children at home, but what our charge should be is to demand the stuff that we pay for and that we own, and that they not keep giving our money and our generational wealth to benefit white people. And that's what the erasure of Black history does. That's what the erasure of real education does. And that's what this both sides thing does, right? Like, if you teach, for instance, that, like, I'm sure somewhere in this world there's a bird that barks, but if you teach children that birds bark and there are some dogs that, meow, you're miseducating them. Even though it's technically true and you want to teach all sides in this instance, you're still miseducating them, because when they hear a dog bark and they think it's a bird, it's because they've been miseducated, not because they just assume something that wasn't true. And I think that's what we have to demand, that our children be educated with facts, with the truth, and with reality, and not miseducated with this both sides that excuses whiteness for the harm that it has done.
Amen. And thank you, Peter. I appreciate all of the never turning from 126 and the support. And we're gonna keep talking about the school and well, it's gonna be more than just the school. 866-801-8255. Michael Harriot is here. Black AF History is the book.
I run my fingers through her hair as she smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one who loves thing is the one?